You're on vacation in Ireland. You've had a pint of the dark stuff at St. James Gate, saw the Book of Kells, and visited Dublin Castle. In your travels through the Emerald Isle, you've seen where the Titanic was built, been in awe of the natural wonder and rugged beauty of the Giant's Causeway and the Cliffs of Moher, and now you're spending a few days in County Cork. It covers much of Ireland's southwest. You're in Cork to visit Blarney Castle, home to the Blarney Stone, which is said to give the gift of gab or eloquence to those who kiss it. Historic Cork City feels like a hidden secret that you just discovered. It has oodles of charm and a foodie scene that holds its own thanks to the small farms and gourmet producers that fill plates with the finest ingredients. You've made it this far and have rented a car to venture further into the rest of County Cork and your next destination, Kinsale. Located at the start of the Wild Atlantic Way on the southern coast, the town is famous for its colorful streets, rich history, and beautiful landscapes. When you enter the vibrant town, you immediately fall in love with the vibrant coastal enclave, which has been called one of Ireland's most beautiful locations. You check into your accommodations and then decide to stretch out your legs after a long day of travel by going on a run. The sun is setting, but you're up for the challenge, and your goal is to run along the coastline to Charles Fort. Running mostly uphill, your muscles burn, but you feel lighter because of the view. It's truly spectacular. You stop by the fort to catch your breath, and you notice your shoe is untied. You put your hand on the fort wall for balance, when suddenly you feel a cold hand reach from the wall to help you. Your eyes widen as you look up to see who helped you. Standing before you is a woman in a white flowing dress, standing motionless on the ramparts, her hair billowing in the wind. And in that moment, your blood turns ice cold. I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Join me as we travel across the pond as I share a tragic tale involving a wedding and 3 funerals, which all took place on the same day. This is the story of the White Lady of Kinsale. At times, it's been called the Irish Riviera. Kinsale is a holiday destination whose name comes from the Irish meaning headland of the sea. The small, vibrant fishing town is known just as much for its colorful narrow streets as it is for its long history. The Vikings are said to have founded it originally, but nothing survived from their settlement. But today, you can find the medieval town about a 30-minute drive south from Cork, on the mouth of the Bannon River. As you can imagine, the town has a rich historical heritage as seen in the winding streets which were inherited from medieval times. In fact, the town grew up on the site of an Anglo-Norman settlement founded in the 12th century. The town itself was granted its first charter in 1334 and was enclosed by walls in 1381. In 1601, the town witnessed the Siege and Battle of Kinsale. That conflict led to the complete English conquest of Ireland and became the defining engagement of the 9 Years' War. But more about that in a bit. Since then, Kinsale has undergone many changes. The medieval town that was originally located on the slightly elevated ground expanded in the 16th century to the wet and marshy area which became the Market Square. It had 5 main gates: Friars Gate, Cork Gate, Watergate, World's End Gate, and Nicholas Gate. And although the walls and gates were largely destroyed during the Battle of Kinsale, the names remain. Boat building became an important industry in Kinsale in the 18th and 19th centuries. Before being reclaimed, the area now occupied by Pier Road was originally occupied by a number of boatyards, most of which were family-run. In the 18th century, quite large ships were built in Kinsale, the best known being the HMS Kinsale, a fifth-rate frigate which was built at the Admiralty Dock at World's End in 1705. Fishing was another key element of Kinsale's economy. In 1829, it is recorded that 4,612 men and boys were employed on fishing boats, and another 1,415 were working in auxiliary industries such as coppering, sailmaking, and fish processing. Distinctive traditional boats known as Kinsale hookers were a common sight at the quayside. Like the boat-building industry, fishing underwent a drastic decline in the 20th century, so the town is lucky to have retained many of its beautiful buildings and shopfronts from the 18th and 19th centuries. Today, it seems like each one is painted in a different color, from pinks to blues and everything in between, giving each building its own personality. Among the many tourist destinations are Desmond Castle, the nearby cliffs of Old Head, and of course, the massive star-shaped structure from the late 17th century, Charles Fort. On the water's edge of Fort Hill, approximately 3 kilometers from Kinsale, is where you will find Charles Fort. Built in 1682 by the British Army, it overlooks Kinsale Harbor and offers incredible views of the picturesque town. To enter, visitors walk over the bridge at the main gate and through the old gatehouse. Immediately, they will be impressed by one of the country's largest military installations, which was built on the site of the ruins of an earlier stronghold known as Barry Castle at Rincurin, which was key during the Siege of Kinsale in 1601. Its dimensions are awe-inspiring, as some of the outer defenses are 16 meters high, and the layout was specifically designed to resist cannon attacks from the harbor. The pentagonal shape is anchored by 5 bastions, named the Kinsale, also known as the Devils, the Charles, the Cockpit, the Flagstaff, and the North. The first 2, the Kinsale and the Charles, are more suitable than the other 3, as they are sea-facing and were expected to see the most action. Constructed between 1677 and 1682, during the reign of King Charles II, it was designed by architect Sir William Robinson from Dublin, who also designed the Royal Hospital. It became known as the New Fort, to contrast with James Fort, the Old Fort, which had been built on the other side of Kinsale Harbor between 1602 and 1607. An underwater chain used to be strung between the 2 forts across the harbor mouth during the times of war to scuttle enemy ships by ripping the bottoms off the incoming vessels. Protecting the land from sea attacks became the primary concern, and so the inland bastions of Fort Charles are overlooked by higher ground. This became its greatest weakness when the fort was subject to a 13-day siege in 1690 during the Williamite War in Ireland, when John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, then 1st Earl, besieged Cork and captured Kinsale and its forts. As I mentioned earlier, the conflict became key in the English conquest of Ireland, when Jacobite supporters of James II fought and lost against his successor, William III, in a conflict related to the 9 Years' War. James II landed at Kinsale in March of 1689 with 2,500 men and the support of King Louis XIV of France. They were fighting to take back the crowns of England, Scotland, and Ireland away from King William III and his wife Queen Mary II, James's daughter. Kinsale became a key battleground as it was strongly defended by the Old Fort and the Charles Fort. Williamite forces assaulted these fortifications, but were unable to take them by storm. The Old Fort fell after an accidental explosion in its gunpowder magazine eventually forced them to surrender. Charles Fort, however, held out for 13 days and surrendered only after receiving guarantees that his 1,200-strong garrison could march away to Limerick. After that, James II returned to exile in France from Kinsale in 1690 following his defeat. Charles Fort was in military use until 1922 because it protected the most utilized natural harbor in Ireland during the 16th to 18th centuries when England fought with Spain and France for dominance. For today's story, we travel to the early 18th century when Charles Fort was governed by a man called Colonel Warner. Under constant threat of attack, the fort needed a strict and stern commander. They got it in the form of Colonel Warner. He ruled with an iron fist, but wasn't shy about jumping in to help officers when needed. He was highly respected despite his many rules and punishments, which included the death penalty to any soldier found sleeping at his post. Colonel Warner had a commanding presence that hid a softer side. He was a widower and raising his daughter, Wilful, by himself. Wilful was a beautiful, kind, and popular young woman. No matter where the colonel went, his daughter always traveled with him. He was extremely protective of her, even as she became an adult. When he was stationed at Charles Fort, many soldiers became enamored with Wilful. However, they knew better than to court the colonel's daughter and stayed clear from her, happy to admire her from afar. That is until Sir Trevor Ashurst laid eyes on Wilful and immediately fell in love with her. He was a tall and handsome English soldier who came from a good family. He summoned the courage, and soon the young couple began to get to know each other. Colonel Warner grew fond of the young soldier and knew that he would be a good match for his daughter. Sir Trevor knew that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Wilful. One afternoon, while the young couple walked around Charles Fort, looking out at Kinsale Harbor, Trevor asked Wilful for her hand in marriage. Wilful accepted and flew into his arms. A lavish wedding and party was planned. It would be held at Charles Fort. On the day of the wedding, Wilful was dressed in a beautiful white wedding gown. She was escorted down the aisle, arm in arm, by her father. I am certain that there wasn't a dry eye as the young couple pledged their love for each other. A merry celebration followed, and all those in attendance danced and drank the night away merrily as music was heard across the harbor. The newly married couple looked to steal away a moment together. They stepped away from the party onto the battlements for some time alone and some much-needed fresh air. As they walked along the wall, the cool air felt wonderful on their glowing faces. They professed their love for each other as the moon lit their path. Wilful looked down towards the dark ocean and spotted some beautiful flowers growing on the rocks below. She commented to her husband and said, "Isn't it amazing how something so beautiful can grow somewhere so austere?" "Just like our love," Trevor said as he gently kissed his new bride. One of the sentries standing on guard at his turret overheard the bride admiring the flowers. He volunteered to climb down the rocky cliff to retrieve the flowers for the bride. The sentry did not want to abandon his post, so he asked Sir Trevor if he would take his place. The groom agreed and took the musket and watchcoat. His new bride was asked to return to the room and wait for her husband there as the evening night was getting cold. Sir Trevor waited for the sentry to return, but grew increasingly tired from the day's celebration and eventually fell asleep. At that very moment, Colonel Warner was inspecting the fort before retiring for the night. As the colonel turned the corner, he spotted one of his sentries asleep while on duty. All the officers knew that this was strictly forbidden and punishable by death. Colonel Warner became incensed and shouted at the sentry, demanding that they stand up at once. Deeply asleep, Trevor did not hear the colonel's command. Colonel Warner's anger grew at the soldier's insolence. How dare he not follow his orders? Enraged, Colonel Warner raised his pistol and shot the sleepy man through the heart. The smell of gun smoke still hung in the air as the colonel took a few steps towards the dead man. That's when the clouds parted and the moon was revealed. Its light shone down, and the colonel saw that the man he had just shot was his new son-in-law. The colonel stepped back in horror when he realized his error. For the first time in his life, Colonel Warner was frozen in fear. He knew that he could not tell his beloved daughter that her new husband was dead, and that he was the one who killed him. At that moment, he decided that he would never tell her what he had done. The colonel stood tall, straightened his jacket and cap. He took a few steps towards the edge of the ramparts and looked down at the treacherous rocks. He heard the waves crashing below. They were the last sounds he heard. Colonel Warner took one step forward and fell to his death on the jagged rocks below. It had been a long time since Wilful last saw her husband. Worried, she returned to see what had detained him. She called out for him and couldn't see him at the sentry post. As she walked closer, she saw Sir Trevor lying dead in a pool of his own blood. In a state of shock, she looked around for help. No one would come to rescue them, but in that moment, she looked over the wall's edge. Down below, she saw her father on the cold, jagged rocks. Still dressed in her wedding gown, the young bride stood motionless, looking at the bodies of her husband and father. Wilful was overcome with grief. How could she ever go on? Feeling hopeless, she followed in her father's footsteps onto the fort's wall. Her white wedding dress blowing in the breeze, she took one final breath and leaned forward. She fell into the cold, icy water of Kinsale Harbor and joined her father and husband. She died instantly. It is believed that Wilful never found peace and continues to wander around Charles Fort and Kinsale since that tragic night. Many people have spotted an apparition dressed in a white wedding gown ascending the stairs in the fort. On many other occasions, soldiers reported hearing disembodied voices, followed by the sight of a lady in white walking through walls. Another time, a nursemaid at the fort saw a figure in white standing over the bed of a sleeping child, and when she got closer, it disappeared. And then there was the confused sergeant's child, who asked her father who the white lady smiling down at them was. He had no idea, as there was no one on the grounds who matched that description. The specter has become known as the White Lady of Kinsale. A local hotel manager spoke of seeing her one New Year's Eve as he looked out of the hotel's window towards the fort. Another local reported stopping next to the fort's wall while on a jog. He noticed his shoelace was untied and leaned down to tie it when he felt a hand reach out for him for support. The jogger was startled and looked around, but there was nobody next to him. While many believe that the lady in white is friendly and kind, others claim to have been attacked. 2 people said that they were knocked unconscious by the angry spirit when she threw them down a flight of stairs. Both people were male military personnel, and they weren't the only ones. In 1922, Fort Charles's medical officer reported that he was physically dragged outside of his room and thrown down the stairs. During this assault, he caught a glimpse of a young woman in a white wedding dress. A year later, another officer was retiring for the night when he felt a cold wind. He was lifted off the ground and then thrown down the stairs by an unseen force. Many blame these events on Wilful, who doesn't just stick to the fort. The White Lady is also seen wandering the streets of Kinsale, which is how the White Lady Hotel got its name. Wilful is said to visit the establishment every couple of weeks. The owner once said that he saw Wilful in the kitchen making toast one New Year's Eve. And if you think these events are from the past, think again. On July 22, 2016, a man claimed to have a very strange experience in front of a little cafe in Kinsale. He posted on Reddit, wondering if anyone else has had a similar experience. He was standing with his wife in front of the Lemon Leaf Cafe, reading the menu on the door. He was standing in front of the black sign, and his wife was on his left. As he read, he felt a hand gently rest on his shoulder, and he felt a breath, as if someone was standing very close behind him, looking over his shoulder at the menu. He turned around, and there was no one there, only his wife. Right before this had happened, he noticed that the street was eerily vacant. The rest of the town had been bustling with people, so he took note of how he found it oddly empty. Many replied to his post with their own experiences, and one pointed him towards the White Lady's tale. Charles Fort is now a major tourist destination, and so is Kinsale. The beautiful little town with the colorful buildings is steeped in history, and if you visit, make sure you pay your respect to the White Lady. Thank you for joining me on our first journey to the Emerald Isle. I'm sure that there will be plenty more to come. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Ebon & Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer, Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnson, with help from Rosin Kufer. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow and share. And if you can give us a like and a 5-star written review, that is always appreciated. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, or if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email me through the website hauntedcanada.com. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.